greatest extent possible. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and or parties with a right and or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the Town of Southborough's website at www.southboroughtown.com. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch or participate in the meeting may do so in the following manner: by finding the meeting at www.southboroughtown.com/remote meetings. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so despite best efforts, we will post on Southborough's website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. With that said, I will now call the meeting to order. Welcome, everybody. And the first item of business is not going to happen. And that was a projected joint meeting with the advisory committee, but we've been advised that for a variety of conflicts that advisory could not meet tonight, and that they're going to be meeting tomorrow to do their reserve fund transfers. But we still have interdepartmental transfers to take care of. And do we have Mr. Ballantyne, or Brian, are you going to take care of that?
I'll actually let Brian handle that. I can help with questions, but I think he can do a better job than I can of being succinct about it.
All right, before we open up for Brian, anybody on the board have any questions about the fact that we're not going to be meeting with advisory? My understanding is that they will meet tomorrow night, so they'll be able to meet the deadlines for July 15th to do the reserve fund transfer. So, is there any need to talk about that before we switch over to Brian?
Okay,
All right.
Marty.
Yes, Sam.
Question. There were some of the transfers required us to sign off on. So if we sign off on those tonight, presumably, then advisory can do everything that they need to do tomorrow night to do the year-end stuff. So we don't need to revisit any of that other stuff.
Correct.
Okay, and Brian will identify those, Mark?
Yes.
That was in the sheet
Brian,
we had, I think.
Yeah, Brian can just walk through these and can speak to the reserve fund so that you understand those as well. But that's just simply advisory's purview.
All right, Mr. Ballantyne, are you there?
I'm here. Are you there?
We're somewhere.
We are.
We're somewhere. Good one. So yes, we have, I think, 8 transfers at the end of the year. I won't take up maybe a minute or two of your time. So the state allows for a couple of options at the end of the year to close any negative balances in any accounts. One is the reserve fund, which has been a traditional source from advisory committee to use their fund to close any gaps. That just requires their sign off. The other option is to transfer from any available source. It basically means if you have money left over in any budget, you can transfer it around at the end of the year to close any deficits. The purpose of that is most likely due to the fact that there are some gray areas, that there aren't any emergency, in some cases we make budgets and they just go over by a little bit, or they go over by a certain reason, but it's not an unexpected emergency such as the reserve fund would require. So the state recognized that and allowed the communities to use this option. So you have 3 transfers in front of you tonight. I think they're fairly straightforward. The only one I imagine you may wonder about is the building one. And I can certainly speak to that. I can't answer the question in full, unfortunately, because I don't think we'll ever know what really happened. But for anyone that knows this $18,000 on your agenda, the building department turned over completely last year, and that means the ZBA side and the building side. So they typically had a building inspector, a part-time ZBA person, and a full-time building administrative person. And we, during the Park Central issues and all the other issues, we reconfigured that to a full-time building inspector and 2 full-time administrative positions. When the whole department turned over last year, there was talk about scaling back the hours. And unfortunately, the whole turnover of the department came during budget time. Lori Lavoli was hired in mid-January, and the other 2 administrative folks were hired in January and April. So there was a little bit of, I think, confusion between the turnover of the department. And somehow it slipped through the budget that the budgeted hours were Lori Lavoli as a full-time person, and then 2 part-time persons, not a part-time and a full-time. No one ever caught it. It was a very strange thing. So we went through this whole year with a full-time building assistant and a part-time ZBA assistant, but only budgeted for 2 part-time administrative people. So that kind of explains that, I hope, as much as it can. Not a good thing, but that's what happened. The other 2 issues I think are really minor issues, just small budgeting issues that went over. If there's any,
Well, Brian, why don't we do this? And Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, but it makes sense that the protocol should be that we vote on them individually as opposed to as a package. So
Sure, that
why don't
makes
we take the postage one first? You've got an explanation in the materials, and see if anybody has any questions about that item and the explanation that's in our written materials.
No questions for me.
I got a question.
All right, Mr. Stivers.
Did Brian Shea have a question?
I did not.
No.
Oh, okay, thanks. I'm not concerned about the transfer number, but that triggers something for me that is interesting in terms of postage. Replay for a couple of weeks ago and Chelsea's comment about the mail out for the DPW thing for the transfer station. Her comment saved like $2,500 or so, which is interesting. And I think in terms of postage, I continue to be impressed by the knowledge of people who understand how the postage world works, which is extraordinarily complex. In my business, we send stuff out, and I'm always amazed at how you can find ways to take advantage of postal regulations to save money on this stuff. So not directly related to this, but it seems to me that an interesting idea might be to take an overall look at what we send out each year across all the departments and try to figure out if there are ways to actually consolidate or rethink how we do that. I know there are at least a couple of people in town who do that for a living, and at least one of them has chimed in periodically with some really good ideas on how we might rethink some of those things. So I think there's an interesting global question there to say, what are we doing and how can we think about it more universally versus having each department sort of doing their own things there. So I'm fine with this number, but I think that again raises an interesting opportunity to maybe save a few more nickels and dimes here, which add up.
I think the biggest, I'm sorry, Marty, the biggest,
No,
to
go ahead, Mark.
Sam's point, the biggest nickel and dime is if we can find a better way to, cheaper way to send out the tax bills. Because a large piece of that number is for sending out the tax bills each year.
Mhm.
So that's really the big driver in that number.
Yeah, and I think I would be surprised that jumping ahead just for 1 second for our discussion of our planning meeting for next week, if that's not on a number of people's lists to talk about that.
That's
So
on
Chelsea's
one.
smiling. All right. So other than that comment, is there a motion?
I'll move to approve the transfer of the postage.
Second.
Any discussion? Ms. Braccio,
Braccio, aye.
Ms. Malinowski.
Aye.
Mr. Shea,
Aye.
Mr. Stivers,
Aye.
and Mr. Healy is aye. All right, that is approved. Why don't we go to the liability insurance? It's just possible we have a little bit longer discussion, although maybe not on the building department. But is there, other than the explanation, is there going to be any questions or discussion on the liability insurance item?
No.
All right, is there a motion?
Move that we approve the liability transfer payment.
Second.
Ms. Braccio. Oh, any
Aye.
discussion? I'm assuming no discussion since we identified it. Ms. Braccio,
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski. Did I hear you, Chelsea? Did you say aye?
Aye, yeah.
Okay. Mr. Shea
Aye.
and Mr. Stivers
Aye.
And Mr. Healy is aye. All right, we heard, that is approved. We heard Mr. Ballantyne's explanation about the building department. Are there any additional questions for him on that?
I have one question, if I may.
Go ahead.
Right. Back to Brian, your comment on that building department. Is it, I don't quite understand where the original 2 part-time people came from. Is it in fact the case that we could actually do 2 part-times there instead of 1 full-time and 1 part-time?
No, I think that's the original plan was never considering 2 part-time, as far as I know. I do know, I tried to go back through my emails because I thought there was some not confusion, but some discussion on which side could do a part-time, a ZBA or a building, like for a little bit of time. And I think that's what led to the confusion. And then again, when the whole department turned over and poor Miss Lavoli came in and was saddled with probably a million things, it just slipped through, and it shouldn't have, but it did. So unfortunately, no. I wish I could say we could be a little leaner in that respect, but they do require a full-time, at least building administrative person.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I recall that there was originally 2 part-time, and then with the added workload, predominantly resulting through that Park Central period, we increased to a full-time for one of the positions. So, but
Well,
I
the
know
Park Central is
after
been
the
sort of dormant.
Yeah, that building, the building administrative person has always been full-time, at least since I've been here.
Right.
And the addition of the zoning person was originally part-time. We couldn't find anybody to fit the position. Park Central came along, we increased it to a full-time position. We hired somebody, and then that person left, the building person left, and the building commissioner left all at the same time. So when we hired the new building commissioner, we said, we want you to be part of building your office again. And she said, I don't think that we need a full-time ZBA. We can do with a part-time. And, and so we hired into those positions, and, that got lost in the discussion. Instead of just reducing one position to part-time, we reduced both positions to part-time. Because we didn't catch it, it's something we own. It didn't impact our ability to provide for the positions the way we should have for the year, and we can correct it now, by doing this transfer.
Marty, if I may.
Sure, Lisa.
So I know the answer to this, and I'm sure most of us know the answer, but for those watching that may not know the answer, fiscal year 21 budget had this in there as a full-time position, correct?
Yes.
I thought so. I just, in case anybody's watching and has a question on how we avoid it for next year, just, again, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, that was going to be my only question. It's been rectified going forward.
Correct.
Yeah. All right. With no further questions from Mr. Ballantyne, is there a motion?
I'll move we approve the building department $18,000 and change transfer as proposed.
second.
Ms. Braccio, discussion. I'm going to keep forgetting that. Seeing none, Ms. Braccio,
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski,
Aye.
Mr. Shea,
Aye.
Mr. Stivers,
Aye.
and Mr. Healy is aye. All right, Brian,
Oh,
wherever
actually,
you
Marty,
are. Oh, do
before
we need to deal? I'm sorry, go ahead.
before we move off this, just one question. And I know that advisory is meeting tomorrow night to discuss the reserve fund transfers. What happened if for some reason advisory does not approve one of the reserve fund transfers? We're assuming right now that they will, but what's the game plan if they don't?
We always get that question, and it's a funny question. So when you incur an expense and you do a deficit in your budget, you own it no matter what. So it would just reduce our free cash next year. However, that's not a good thing. The auditor and the DOR frown on that for obvious reasons. They like to see your house in order. So likely it would be mentioned on an audit report, and we'd probably be slapped on the hand. But yeah, either way, it's going to be taken off our books.
So-
we want to do the right thing.
Yep. if advisory was able to meet with us tonight and they turned down and didn't approve one of the reserve fund transfers, could we have approved it under the benefits budget
Yes.
as a transfer?
Yeah,
Yes,
so one of the things we did prior to putting this together was we had tried to send everything to advisory first and see if there was any issues, if there was anything they didn't agree with. Obviously, they agree with the allocations of interdepartmentals versus reserve fund transfers. But yes, Brian, if we all met tonight and they didn't agree it was an applicable reserve fund transfer, we could have shifted the whole thing to come out of the benefits budget and do it as an interdepartmental. They still would have to approve those though. That's a joint approval. So if we did it and they didn't do them, we'd still be in the same boat with the auditor.
And I'm
I'll just-
guessing, based on the way that conversation went, that even if we then acted at our next meeting, which is only a week from now, that wouldn't dissolve the issues with the auditor and the like, and the money would have to come out of free cash, and that'd be a black mark against us.
correct.
Okay.
Hopefully, by waiting until the very last possible day to have the meeting, they do approve them. I just hope that, so we don't get put into that situation. So
Very hopeful.
All right. I think, Mr. Ballantyne, we are done with you.
Thank you.
Have a good
Have a
evening.
good night.
All right.
Time for dinner.
Thanks.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, you can call me Marty.
Oh, Marty. About the reserve fund, seeing as I sat on advisory for most of this fiscal year, I just wanted to provide a few comments. I think with the inception of the capital committee, I think that will help with any vehicles that come up unexpectedly that need to be replaced. This was a topic of discussion that we had in the fall on advisory when the building vehicle needed to be replaced. So I think that, looking at kind of the whole fleet within the town makes sense to make sure that we don't have any opportunities to kind of shift things around when something needs to be replaced. The second one is for the utilities budget for the other operations department number 159. I think given the analysis and the data that was presented to us, it gives us some confidence that the amendment that was made at town meeting will be sufficient for the FY21 budget. So for anyone that's watching saying, oh, we did go over budget on the other operations line item for FY20, we have to remember that we did not budget for the new public safety building in FY20. And we also had some parallel time when the old buildings and the new building were running. So I think we can be confident that the 400,000 or the 400 and change that was approved for Department 159 is in alignment with what we're seeing for the FY20.
Okay, great. And we're going to lose this inside information about advisory pretty quickly, but helpful now.
Well, that's Kelly in there.
All right. Any other discussion about the advisory items or the interdepartmental transfers? All right, we're on to item 2B, and hopefully Mr. Davis is still there.
He is. I understand that he shut off the air conditioning in his office, so it'd make him look all, all labored and really into his work and everything. So you'd really get the performance tonight.
Yeah, that's what I was going for. That's exactly it.
Tim, how are you? You're going to give us an update on where things stand with recreation, both, I guess, in the near, the medium, and maybe even the long term.
Absolutely.
So-
Yeah, I was going to kind of touch on two things. One, facility updates. There's been a lot of construction going on in town that some may or may not have seen. So I just want to touch on those projects, and then just kind of a general update on programming piece of it, and then the sports leagues that are starting to come back to town and in the fields. So I'll start with construction. We have
And Tim, what I'm going to just interrupt what I'm asking you to do for the three topics, so that we're not jumping back and trying to remember what was said. When you finish each one, why don't we see if there are questions, and then before we move on to the second one, fair enough?
You got it. Absolutely.
All right.
So facility wise, so the first thing is the Petrie Field down at Neary. That project has been completed. It finished up late last week. Looks beautiful. So we got a brand new field out there, brand new sod, irrigation's pumping like it's supposed to. Currently, that is security fenced off around to keep the public off of it. We need that sod to establish correctly. So it's going to be closed for about 8 weeks, which is the recommended time for that sod to establish. So that'll be closed until about mid-September. And then mid-September, we will reopen for the public. We will reopen for the schools, fingers crossed for them to use. And then fall sports again, fingers crossed that can be used. So overall, it went pretty well. Like any project, you start digging, you never know what you're going to find. So we had a couple holdups, but I just want to thank the Public Works Department as well as specifically the Water Department for their assistance when it came to tapping into that water line going on that main road. They were really vital to get that project to the finish line. So it was great. So, but Petrie is done. So we'll check that one off the list. And we're very, very happy with it. We hope the town is as well. The townhouse playground is just about done. Right behind the townhouse, our little corner playground over there. It was installed last week, again, with the help of DPW, as well as some individuals from the company that we purchased the equipment from. All in all, they got that playground built in 4 hours, which was just impressive to watch. So again, a thank you to DPW for sending out a full crew to assist us with that last week. Right now, where it stands, the big piece of that playground that's new is there's an ADA port in place rubber accessible route that's going from the parking lot up to the play structure. The base coat is down there now. They took a break today because of the pending weather. Unfortunately, I don't think Southborough got any rain, at least where I am. So that was kind of a bummer, but they'll be back tomorrow. They'll put the top coat on. That will need to cure for a day. All the wood fibers there for the playground. So DPW will get in Friday, I believe, to spread that and to bring everything up to grade where it's supposed to be for safety wise. So, you know, weather permitting, that playground should be open this weekend for the public. So that was a super fun project. We're really excited about it. Came out really, really good. It's a great use of that space out there. And a lot of people have been walking by it. We've been out there working. So we hope that it's going to be used quite a lot over the summer, especially being in the shade. So that was a really good one. The next kind of random update I figured I'd throw in is Calander Field. This is obviously already on fall town meeting. Fingers crossed if we have a fall town meeting. But prior to everything going on, there was a lot of questions about the ability for the proposed plan that which we put forward to CPC and the town, if it was going to be able to withstand the water that's coming off that hill, which is really the problem and the issue out there with the drainage and, you know, reestablishing the swale that goes around the field. And we obviously were confident in our engineer and we were confident in the work that we received and we were saying yes, but there's still a lot of questions. So what we did was we hired another third-party engineer to do an independent report just to be sure. And so we got that report back a little while ago. This is a little dated update, but it came out to what we hoped. The engineer did come back and say what is proposed will handle the amount of water that's coming down. I was out there with him. He was climbing in the woods. He was comparing the as-built plans when the field was originally built, comparing it to what we were proposing, and comparing pretty much anything and everything and inspecting anything he can on that hill with the route in which the water comes down. So that's prepared in a document that I'll be prepared to send you all for review, as well as make public for anybody who wants to view it prior to the fall town meeting, just so that the residents can be as informed as possible. So hopefully that will answer a lot of the questions that may be coming about. But we were happy to hear that, you know, our initial take on it was positive and was correct. So again, you know, fingers crossed for a fall town meeting that we can get that through. And then that would be the next field on our list to tackle. And then the last one is a constant update is the lighting projects at Mooney and Neary. We had a extremely productive meeting last week with the planning department with Karina and Sarah. I was joined, there's myself, Arthur Eddy from Traverse Landscape Architects, who is our hired firm, as well as Karen Galligan from DPW. And really what we presented to them last week as our initial meeting before we submit was far beyond anything we've done in the past. And I think that was recognized right away by planning. We got all of our questions on the table, all of our concerns. Really, we didn't hold back because we can't really afford the time to at this point. And we addressed everything we had. We were thrown a lot of questions. We had the answers for them, whether it be verbal or actually on the plans. So we left that meeting very confident of what we're going to be putting forth. So on Thursday, we will be submitting our application to the planning board for these lighting projects officially. That will put us on the August 10th agenda to speak with the planning board publicly. It'll be myself, Traverse Landscape Architects, Arthur and his partner Justin. Musco Lighting will be at that meeting as well, and then I believe Karen will be joining us as well. So we'll have a full team ready to go to speak to our plans, to speak to the project, to hopefully answer any questions that come through. I know there's a lot of public interest too, so we've been getting a lot of questions on it, and I'll just say here as well, if you're interested, please show up to the meeting. Please voice your concerns, voice your support, whatever you want to do. But that August 10th date is super important, and we're hopeful it will only take that one meeting, but we'll see how it goes. But again, we're feeling really good as it comes to the lighting piece of it. But those are my facility pieces. Does anybody have any questions on those or comments?
If I may, Marty.
Yep, Lisa.
Tim, what is your by the way, great updates. And I'm glad to hear about Clanderfield. I know there's been a lot of talk about that and concern about that. But as far as the lighting goes, what is your kind of drop dead date? So if you get it approved, say at the August 10th or even in September, what is the time frame in order to get these in and get these done? Or is it going to be pushed to next year?
So I think the wild card, as everything else going on, is COVID. Will, I think, judge the production timeline of getting the poles created. If everything happens in a perfect world, we're looking at about an 8 to 11 week process from procurement and bidding and advertising through obtaining the pieces and construction. They only take, I think it's about 2 days they should go up, so it's a very, very quick project. It's just a matter of getting them manufactured and out to the site. So in an ideal world, talking to the vendors, we're looking at 8 to 11 weeks is what they're telling us.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Marty.
Yeah, anyone else? Chelsea, go ahead.
Thanks for the update, Tim. Just one question on the light project. Can you refresh my memory on which town meeting that was approved for, and if we're still within the appropriation in terms of finances to cover that, if the project may have gone up or not?
Mm-hmm. I'm under the understanding that we are. We did check with Musco pricing wise. We did check with Musco. The lights have changed. I think it's been, and unfortunately I don't have it in front of me, and Mark, you may know off the top of your head, I think it's been about 3 or 4 years since it's been allocated. The lights have obviously changed, the quality and the makeup of them. So we are proposing to switch to LED, obviously, for energy's sake. We have not gotten any indication from Musco that it is changing the scope or the price of the project. So obviously it all will come back once we put it out to bid, just like any other projects. But we have our fingers crossed that we should be in pretty good shape, especially with I think they put about a 10 or 15% contingency in that may help us at this point.
Thank you.
All right, Tim, I've got two quick things also on the lighting project. Number one, I'm assuming the answer to this is yes, but I just want to ask it and make sure. The various youth groups that will directly benefit from the lights, I am assuming that they are aware of the August 10th date.
Yes.
All right, I accept that nod.
Very
okay,
much so.
I assume that was the case. And secondly, we've got a meeting a week from now, and it's primarily, maybe ultimately exclusively a planning meeting for us. But, and maybe there's a question for both you and Mark. I know this has been approved by town meeting. It was supported by a previous incarnation of the Board of Selectmen. Would it be beneficial does anyone think, and Mark and Tim, your thoughts as well, for us to take a form to post it for July 21 and to take a formal vote that based on your recap of where things stand with the lighting, that we're very much in support of it, going forward as soon as possible. Would that be, I mean, individually, we can all say that on August 10th, but whether or not it makes sense to do that as a board. Anyone?
I'll defer to Tim since he met with planning, but I think that if you do take such a vote, it then gives the ability to any one of you who happens to attend to basically speak to the vote that the board took rather than just your individual position as a selectman.
Yeah, and I was going to say at this point, I think really any support helps, especially it being 3+ years from the initial, as you mentioned yourself. So I would appreciate it on a personal level. I think to have the backing of the board to help get this to the finish line. So if that's something that you're willing to do, I would be in support of it.
So I'll just say, speaking only for myself, I would vote in support of that, but hopefully the board would vote in support of that, and we wouldn't get a vote in the opposite direction.
Always a chance.
So,
No, I agree. I think that's a useful thing.
Okay. All right. Well, then, Mark, you can put note. We'll put it on one of the outside items for our July 21 agenda. Other than that, Tim, great update on the facility stuff. And what's next?
Um,
Sorry.
actually,
Oh, wait
Marty,
a minute. I'm sorry.
sorry, either
I
Chelsea
thought
or
I was
I.
speaking last. Okay. All right. Go ahead.
If there's any way, Tim, that, again, I wasn't on the board when that vote was taken. I know Chelsea wasn't, and I know Sam wasn't as well. Is there any way that you could, in advance of our vote, kind of give us a little bit of background and even maybe a copy of the plans just to refresh our memory? And again, I'm not saying this because we're not in support, but I think before I take a vote, I'd like to know exactly what I'm voting on.
Yeah, at that point too, everything will be stamped and complete. So I'll have them in my possession.
Okay.
So I can.
That's it. Thank you.
All right. Chelsea? No, you're all set.
It was the same as
Oh.
Lisa.
Okay. All right. Tim, item 2.
So I want to just touch base on program wise and kind of youth sports in town. If you've been out in town kind of past 4 p.m., you're starting to see that the kids are starting to invade the fields once again, which is really cool to see. So I just want to let you know that right now we're obviously operating at much less capacity as we traditionally are through the summer. Right now we have Southborough Little League going, Northborough, Southborough lacrosse, Central lacrosse, Algonquin summer soccer, and then a couple of various adult and youth soccer leagues. All of these are obviously permitted through us, and I just wanted to just make you aware of the process of how we're going about it right now. Upon providing the insurance and providing the necessaries that we ask no matter what, every group has either met me via phone call or virtually or what it be, and they have presented to us a plan to address COVID on their team and to address their players' safety. And we are not permitting groups unless we have hard copies of that have been explained and reviewed by myself in conjunction with the Board of Health if I have any issues or questions. We have turned groups away because of this. It's something that I say that to kind of make the point that we are taking it serious. There are some groups that kind of were lackadaisical on things and not understanding the point we were taking. So unfortunately, it wasn't going to work out. But just as much as I'm sure the parents are, we're just as concerned with the kids out there on the field. So we're taking extra steps before we just kind of throw permits out in hopes that people pay and then go out on the grass. So, but it's good to see all those leagues out. I know that the fall sports are taking registrations to be proactive. We don't know what that's going to look like, obviously. Luckily, it's not so much the school sports that we deal with, but we'll wait to see what the fall is. But we are preparing accordingly with kind of planning what's going to be open, what needs a little work, just in case we can kind of go full tilt when it comes to the fall. I want to just touch on something that Mark said, I think the last update, and that was with St. Mark's and Fay. I know he pretty much covered it, but I just want to reiterate that really over the last month and a half, myself and the coordinators from Fay and St. Mark's have been in constant contact weekly, if not daily, about not so much field usage, but really using each other to lean on when it comes to questions, because everyone's dealing with the program piece of it, everyone's dealing with the public piece of it, and really kind of bouncing ideas and information off one another. So I just wanted to point that out and thank them publicly for their support with our programs, with our challenges and understanding our challenges and helping with that. It is of note that working with St. Mark's, they had a group that was a traditional group there every single summer, which was Central Lacrosse, that were not able to use their fields because of St. Mark's opening schedule. They passed them on to us. We worked with them, so now we have a very substantial group out on the grass fields in town, which helps us financially, obviously, but hopefully that's a relationship we're going to keep for some time between the two entities to get their program to stay in town. So it's been really wonderful. And I know Mark mentioned it, but I just wanted to mention it myself, and again thank them for their collaboration on that. On the recreation side, we are admittedly still keeping it light when it comes to programs. We were kicking around some plans to do a kind of a playground camp-like program, nothing too licensed or official. But we've been keeping our eye on the trends around the country, specifically New England and the Northeast, and kind of seeing how camps are operating, seeing the outcome of these camps. And a lot of cases, unfortunately, has not been positive. A lot of camps are shutting down because of spread. And a lot of camps are just shutting down because they thought the guidelines they had in place were enough, and it proved not to be. So we're going to keep playing it safe this summer when it comes to programming, and we're going to wait to see what happens in the fall with schools and put our best foot forward on that. We are supporting one soccer camp through Best FC Football Club. They have been a constant summer presence with us. We've sat down with them, reviewed their protocols and their numbers and everything of that nature, and we feel confident that they can do that. So we do have a small soccer camp that we are sponsoring with Best that will be happening in August. But outside of that, when it comes to camp-like stuff, we're still going to stick to our guns and kind of wait out the summer and again see what the fall brings. We are continuing to work with the library, with youth and family, collaborate on programs with them, help them registration, run their programs, virtually, things of that nature. So we've been very busy with that. It's just been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun to work with those two departments and get to know them on a different level. So that's been keeping us really busy on that piece of it. I guess I feel like lately, every time I'm in front of you guys, it's been a real bummer because I'm talking about canceling a lot of stuff. So unfortunately, I got one bummer that we were very excited, hopefully, to keep concerts on, summer concerts. We were awaiting the guidelines to come out. We had a distancing plan in place, and we felt, we were really pumped up about it to get going. Guidelines came out, and it just wasn't reachable what the guidelines were when it came to, which was all understanding, all based on science, all based on everything that we know already when it comes to the distancing of the band within themselves on stage, to the distancing of the crowd from the band. Knowing our setup down at Neary, we just were not going to be able to make it work. So we decided to call it this summer. Admittedly, it's a financial help too, that we won't be expending those funds, but all the bands were very understanding as they've been booked since the winter pretty much, and we're going to promise them first take next summer in hopes that we can get back to normal on that. And they were all super understanding. But movies are still a go right now, so we are still planning on doing our outdoor movie nights. As I said here tonight, we're going to be doing every Tuesday in August. We're going to be doing it down at Neary. We're hoping to do a similar setup, kind of like town meeting, very spread out. Everyone's going to have their own little bubble to sit in. Just spaced out, making it as safe as possible. We're just waiting on a few confirmations on a few details when it comes to that. And then we're hopeful to have all that information, movies, times, locations, everything of that nature released by the end of the week. So, fingers crossed on that we'll get that going. I'm going to ignore the mosquitoes as they are right now, but we'll keep the thumb on the pulse when it comes to that, and we'll hope for the best. But again, we're super pumped. We just, we want to get back out there with the community and our residents and interact. So hopefully this will go through and we can end the summer on a really high note with these movie nights. And then just the last thing I have is that we're really, weekly in talks with the schools to really get an update as much as we can. No matter what the situation is going to be, you'll see something from us. We're going to address whatever the makeup of school is going to be to the best of our ability. We're going to put forth, like I say all the time, our best foot forward for families, because we know the need. We have a lot of vendors in the wings waiting to put together programs and help us out. So as soon as we catch word, which hopefully will be in the next few weeks or so leading up to September, we'll start working on our fall offering and get it out there. So that's all I have. Overall, we've been obviously staying very busy. I thank Denise and I thank Alex for their assistance, whether it be us rotating in the office or at home, working as best as possible from their situations to keep things going. So we'll keep our fingers crossed from fall, and that's all I got. So if you have any questions, happy to answer.
Yes, Lisa.
Sorry, just a couple. I have a question, and then I just have a couple comments. So I guess I'll do my comments first. I'm bummed about the summer concert series. I have to tell you, that is like the absolute best. So I'm a little bummed about that. I wanted to thank you. I'm really impressed with the processes that you've put in place with the COVID testing and not testing, but just the process you've put in place to keep the safety of our families first. I really, really appreciate that. My question is summer nights. Is that still technically a go, or is that scrubbed at this point?
It's not officially anything right now.
Okay.
I think we're kind of still in a holding pattern to see what the next, step of phase 3 will be. If it was this weekend, it would not happen because of the guidelines and what they entail. But we're going to see what the next is. There's a million ways of looking at it, but we're actively talking about it with those involved. So we're gonna have to make a decision soon. So you'll know as soon as we do.
Okay. Again, thank you for everything, Tim. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Chelsea, yep.
Thanks, Tim. As part of the permitting process and approvals, are you then also checking in to make sure that they're following what they filled out? And are you essentially driving by the fields to make sure that they're abiding by what they committed to?
Yeah, I kind of check in, and they obviously don't know I check in, so it's kind of good. I keep them on their toes. But yes, especially with the bigger groups, with the more involved groups, we've been going by just making sure. Everyone's been great. We haven't had any issues to date. Knock on wood. They've been super vigilant. So if anybody out there is watching, keep it up because it's making everything a lot easier. So.
And I did have an opportunity to watch your meeting last week, and just one thing I wanted to mention was that you're not sending out a brochure for the fall. It will be all electronic, given kind of the timeline.
Right.
And I've gotten a lot of good feedback about your new website. So I think that probably makes sense and it's good timing. So just wanted to.
Yeah, we made that decision just because of the time, like you said, the time constraint. It'll look very similar. It's going to be a very interactive digital brochure. So hopefully the experience will still be great. But like you said, we'll probably hopefully get that out late August, early September.
Okay, thank you.
Sam, it looked like you had your hand up.
Yeah. First, Tim, thanks. Great update. Clearly a difficult time, but sounds like you guys are doing a great job trying to keep ahead of things here. Several meetings ago, we heard from a gentleman, I think from the Little League group, and it sounds to me like with Little League starting up, they ought to be relatively satisfied now. Is that your understanding that they're in good shape at this point?
Very, yeah. That's one of the groups I talk to at this point on a weekly basis. They're actually expanding. They're doing so well, so they're going to be over at Fayetteville starting next week, just with some of the little kids. So they're very happy with the setup right now.
Good. Are there going to be games, or are we still not doing games yet?
We can do games. What we're seeing is just scrimmages, nothing too majorly competitive. Tournaments are allowed, but those aren't scheduled to my knowledge until late August to give more time. I think that was part of the push to get them going as soon as possible, as they needed a certain amount of games and practices to qualify. So they're doing kind of low-level games, scrimmages, internal, and then tournaments will be in August, I believe.
Good. Have you considered a drone fleet for monitoring compliance on the field?
Put it in my budget, I will.
Careful what you wish for, Sam.
Yeah.
Chelsea saved enough last meeting to buy 2 or 3 drones. So
Yeah.
Just from very quickly, Tim, I mean, it is in a way, kind of sad how startling it was to see kids out on a field again. When I drove by Woodward and there was a group of young women playing softball, it was almost disorienting to see them out there. I mean, it's great, but it's a comment on the times that I was a bit taken aback by the whole thing. So,
Mhm.
but great report, and I hope things break our way.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
All right, Tim, we're going to let you go. Take care.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Good to see you.
Thank you.
All right, next item is the chairman's report. And you'll see that there's a bit of a theme in this, and it's going to be, we can talk about that in a week. And the first one, I think folks saw that there's a capital planning vacancy. And in addition to that, that's certainly one of the items I want to talk about, how we deal with vacancies and outreach to various committees and the like for next week. So I'm kicking that over. Shared streets. Brian, the first meeting I went to, the Metro West Collaborative, subbing in for you. It was interesting because Karen had just made a presentation to us about the, terrific, items she had that seemed to fit squarely within the shared streets guidelines for, potential grants. And then I was on in this Zoom meeting, and folks from the state, the end of this is good. Folks from the state explained that no, shared streets couldn't be used for permanent sidewalks. So I reported that back to Mark and Karen, who pushed on their end and got a completely different answer from, I think most importantly, the Lieutenant Governor's office, that in fact it was contemplated to cover the sort of projects that Karen's put together for the town of Southborough. So my understanding is that our proposal is ongoing, and that we've gotten a green light from the Lieutenant Governor's office that in fact what I was told by another branch of the state at this Metro West Collaborative was in fact not the case. So knock on wood that's the correct information. Just kind of odd that, maybe not too odd, that the state doesn't have its act completely together about what
Shocking.
is it? Yeah. Just a bit of a heads up, looking at Aldo's legal bill for the last couple of months. And I think it makes sense to do it every couple of months, particularly with the Park Central litigation heating up, is to put that on our August agenda, to get another update from Aldo about where various things stand on the legal side of things. We've gotten some inquiries about naming about for the public safety building, particularly given what's going on nationwide about naming issues. I think that was going to be another item that I was going to have more broadly as a discussion item for our July 21 agenda. So that's yet another thing that I'm reporting but kicking. I got a call from Mr. Davis about the open meeting law litigation, and it looks like the litigation. You may remember that he filed to move the case from state court, where it had been originally filed, to federal court, and that was because there was a federal civil rights claim in the complaint. Every action has a reaction. The reaction from the plaintiffs in the case is that it looks like they're going to withdraw their civil rights complaint, which takes away federal jurisdiction. So the case is probably going to end up back in state court. It might be on its way right now. More broadly, he asked how frequently we wanted him to update on the litigation. And obviously litigation is something I'm pretty familiar with, and something happens every week or two that is a decision that a lawyer has to make strategically about whether or not maybe to depose somebody, maybe to make a motion to compel something and the like. I told him that I would recommend that for minor strategic items like that he could report it to myself or Mark, and we would report it to the board rather than having him come in for each of those items. And that if in reporting any of those, anyone on the board wanted a fuller discussion of that particular, again, strategic decision, that we then would call him in rather than having him come in as a matter of course. If somebody's not comfortable with that, that's fine with me. It's just that it happens in litigation. There are decisions every week, every couple of weeks that are strategic, and it doesn't seem particularly efficient to have him come in every time there's a decision like that. But I'll get people's reaction to that before I move on to my last couple of items.
Fine with me.
Yep, I agree with that as well.
Me too.
Okay. Next, I didn't realize this. It makes perfect sense. But various items come through Mark, and they're way up in the chair's bucket about things like Eagle Scout ceremonies that people have, and other sort of townwide items where there is a request for someone from the Board of Selectmen to appear. And I'm going to kick this as well to July 21st for discussion about exactly how do we just want to have a rotating. I'm happy to go to a lot of them. By the same token, the couple I've been to during this past year, they're fun. It's nice to, get out and be a representative of the town at an Eagle Scout ceremony or at the town scholarship or something like that, and just have a discussion on July 21st about what makes sense for members of the board to be the designee for appearing at something like that. So again, kicking that to July 21st, but just wanted to give a heads up. And the final thing is, there is, Mark received what I thought was going to be about 2 paragraphs. It ended up being about 3 pages, a letter that's been put together by various communities in the area relating to the Floyd killing and its aftermath, and items relating to legislative initiatives and what cities and towns may or may not do in support of that. And so a request, it looks like the letter was generated maybe 3 weeks ago. I saw it for the first time a couple of days ago. It didn't have a chance to get on our agenda. I think the email to Mark was the same day I saw it. And it is, I think, something that we should talk about on July 21st. Again, I suspect it's probably in a lot of people's lists of things to talk about on July 21. Exactly what steps, discussions, et cetera, we want to have in light of the unrest in the country the last 6 or 7 weeks. The letter itself asked for, it was directed to Mark, but it's really for the town to join in support of the letter. Obviously, it's not on our agenda tonight. My recommendation would be there's a lot of things in it, and there's a lot of things I'd want to talk about before signing on in support. There are specific legislative items that are talked about and the like. I'd want to talk to our chief of police before we sign on to various statements made about the police in the letter. So my inclination is to respond and say, thank you very much. We have ongoing discussions about this in the town of Southborough, including a meeting we plan on having July 21st, and we'll be in touch or something to that effect. But happy to talk about it a little bit more tonight.
It sounds like the right statement at this point, I think.
Yeah, I think so. I'd be curious to see that letter as well.
Absolutely.
If you're gonna have Mark forward that to the full board, that would be good.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you.
All set with that, Mark? Okay. That is it. As I said, I'm kicking an awful lot to discussion for July 21st, and hopefully that was 6 or 7 items. Maybe that'll be the norm for chairman's report, but that was it for tonight. So, since I've seen her, Lisa would be very good in Jeopardy because she gets to the buzzer quicker than other people. So I'm going to start with Chelsea and see if she has any report, since she's been beaten out by Lisa a couple of times tonight.
I don't.
There's a chance. Gee.
Actually,
All right.
Marty, I have nothing either, so.
Okay. Sam,
I've got a couple of small news items, less for the board than anybody who might be watching here. But interesting to see the golf course appears to be off to a great start this season. The data that I've seen shows that the rounds are up by almost 30% from May to June. So that's a great start here. And I know we're going to be talking about more of the golf course committee charge later, but that's very encouraging, and hopefully they can keep that going, and that helps the financial viability of the course. Second point, again, is that for those of you who've been watching the news, Governor Baker showed up at NECC yesterday to announce a grant for special education residential programs, 16 million statewide, and NECC got about $1.9 million of that, which is great news to allow them to keep their programs going during a time when the residential programs are under substantial stress. So good news for the NECC, and again, great to have them in town.
Brian, anything for you, or are we all set?
Nope, nothing for me. I'm all set tonight.
Town administrator report, Mr. Purple.
Mr. Chairman, just to follow up on Sam's comment about golf, I've been forwarding you the monthly reports that we get from Bill Harrison. And as Sam said, it's been a good year. Well, considering they should have had some of March and some of April, and the reports for both those months said 0, it is turning into it is going to turn into a good year. And if they continue this way through Thanksgiving, they could see revenues probably around $400,000. Now recall that the 1-year extension that the board signed with the management company did not provide for a monthly payment as it had in the past, but instead allowed for the town to receive a percentage of any revenue over $200,000. So based simply on May and June, they've already at 130, 140,000 of revenue. So I think that, we definitely will see some money coming back to the town this year. That money will go into the revolving fund that was set up for the golf operation that can only then be used on the golf course and for improvements and everything over there, so we can continue to invest in the operation. So I'm really glad that after everything they've been through the past couple of years, they're finally seeing, a nice turnaround. Bill Harrison has said they're seeing a lot of new faces and people they haven't seen before. People very much like the improvements. It just seems that people are hitting the clubhouse a little bit more off this new first tee. I don't understand that, because that is really, it's a tough shot to make, even for an amateur like me.
They should put a flag pin there and nobody will hit it. So
we replaced the window. I had facilities replace the window in the clubhouse because it was getting hit with I think it was 1/4-inch plexiglass, so that we're not going to have that issue anymore. But it's, like I said, it's all good. It looks great, and they're getting good response. And I think once we can start to bring, the high school teams back and everything else now, it's going to continue to get better. This is a nice way to kick that off. The townhouse, the buildings, townhouse, DPW, and that we've started to open back up to the public by appointment. I will say that there has been interest in people making appointments. Most of those appointments, I will say, very few people are actually coming into the townhouse because of the nice weather. We're holding those meetings with people usually outside at the picnic table, right outside the door. It makes for a nice setting. Allows us to get out and get a little fresh air. But it is working. There is an interest, and everybody has been very good about it. Things continue. We're all set inside the building in terms of floor markings. Facilities has done a great job. John Parent has really stepped up on that with the signage and everything else, and hand sanitizer. We're ready. We're ready when the phasing says that we're ready. So that has worked out well. And the last piece, which you may have noticed if you've driven anywhere near the townhouse, is that Main Street's really kicking into gear. So I wanted to give you just a little bit of an update. I talked to Karen Galligan earlier today, and it's always nice to end on a good note. So this is a good note. Except for Common Street, which is going to be done closer to the end of the project, the contract is going to be done with excavating the roadway in the next day or so, as early as end of day tomorrow. And then they're bringing in the gravel burrow and starting to build the road back up, doing some fine grading. And then all grading and gravel should be in place by the first couple of days of next week. They're then bringing in the crushed stone, getting that all set, and they could be laying the asphalt base coat by the week of the 27th. So by the end of July, we could start seeing asphalt, which would be very exciting again. And then there may be a couple of weeks where you're not going to see too much activity. They're going to be finishing the walls. You can see the wall that they're doing out by Fay looks really nice at this point. And then they're going to be back to work on the curb and the sidewalks. Whether they can get the final pave and the striping all done before snow flies, that's the question. But if anything is left off the table, it would be that item until the spring. One thing that is a little bit of a fly in the ointment is utility poles. Verizon needs to move a lot of these poles, otherwise they're going to end up in the middle of sidewalks, in the middle of new pavement, and then when they get moved, we're going to have to disrupt things and patch things, and that's what we're trying to avoid. So I know that Karen has been working with our legislators to see if we can't get some muscle to move Verizon on some of these things and make sure that everything is taken care of at the time that it needs to be. So that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Mark, just Marty, if I may follow up. Do we know is the power on the new poles? Is electric on the new poles? We're just waiting for Verizon. Is that the deal?
Yes. Yes.
And-
So I think it's the final move off the pole, Brian, and then the pole needs to be excavated. The old pole.
But the new poles have been there certainly for a while, so
They have
it's
been.
not as
Yeah.
though, they've been held up because the new poles haven't been in the ground. So
No, it's never the issue for them to come put the new poles in. It's always the issue for them to come take the old poles out. And that's why all these communities end up dealing with all of these double pole issues.
Mark, I'm going to follow up with you and then maybe Karen on this and whatever additional heft there might be for a member, the chair of the Board of Selectmen, to make similar calls. I mean, that would be crazy if that ended up being an issue for this project. So I'll follow up with you on that.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Anything in response to any of the reports? I think we're all set. All right. Consent agenda. Does anyone have any? I know Mr. Shea already communicated to me that he's going to recuse on item D. But other than that, are there any holes that anybody wants to put on any of the items A through I?
Item D, please.
Okay.
A and H, please.
Okay.
None for me.
Okay. And the one thing, I'm not going to put a hold on it, but again, keeping with my track record, I will tell you that I is consistent with what St. Mark's told me they were going to do for fiscal year 20 in terms of increasing the amount. That amount generally reflects, and I checked with Brian on this, the amount of taxes that were attributable to the purchase they made in fiscal year 20. But having said that, I'll kick the whole issue of pilot over to, again, our planning meeting. It's going to be one of my items, and I will update and also give you an idea of based on my discussions, based on my research, what I think makes sense for the next step in dealing with the various educational entities. So as I said, I'm not going to hold it, but just wanted to give that little additional context to that annual donation from St. Mark's. So holding A, D, and H, is there a motion to approve items B, C, E, F, G, and I?
So
So
moved.
move.
So seconded.
All right. All in favor, Ms. Braccio,
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski, Mr. Shea,
Aye.
Mr. Stivers,
Aye.
and Mr. Healy is aye. All right, so Ms. Malinowski, you held A.
I did. In scheduled appointments, section 3A, Miss Galligan, she added that the DPW is looking to charge $10 for replacement stickers. She was actually looking to remove that charge, and we voted to keep it in.
All right, that's consistent with my memory as well.
Mhm.
Me too.
Okay.
Mr.
Um,
Chairman, I've got, oh, I'm sorry. Did you have another one, Chelsea?
no, I'm good. Thank you.
I had one other one and it was kind of funny on page 6 under public comment, item 8, summer schedule for selectmen's meeting. And it talks about the selectmen meeting on July 14th for a regular business meeting and to discuss the interdepartmental transfers with the planning board. I got an email from the planner and she said she had looked through the packet and she wanted to know what these transfers were with her board. So she could inform them thusly. And so unless the board has any objection, the Scrivener's error, we'll replace that with advisory. And so
Sure.
I'm really glad Chelsea held that item. So.
Okay. So with those two edits to the minutes, is there anything else, Ms. Malinowski?
That was it. Thank you.
Okay. So I will then move to approve item A, the minutes from June 23, 2020.
Second.
Any discussion? Ms. Braccio,
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski,
Aye.
Mr. Shea,
Aye.
Mr. Stivers,
Aye.
and Mr. Healy is aye. You know what? I'm going to jump ahead. I'm going to jump over D to H. And Chelsea, you held that one as well?
I did, yes. So when I was reviewing the application, the employee at Chestnut Hill Farm, I don't believe works there anymore. And it looks like we're looking for a 24/7 contact information. So I wanted to make sure that that was updated because it's an important contact to have. So if we could go back to Chestnut Hill and have it updated.
Yeah, we'll update that before we release the license. So that's a good catch. Thank you.
Okay, with that, then I will move to, with that correction and follow up, I'll move to approve item H, the one-day alcohol license applications for August 8th and 22nd for Chestnut Hill Farm.
Second.
Discussion. Ms. Braccio,
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski.
Aye.
Mr. Shea,
Aye.
Mr. Stivers,
Aye.
and Mr. Healy is aye. All right, that leaves item D. Ms. Braccio, you held that.
I did.
So actually, Marty, why don't I leave? Mark, if you want to give me a text message or call me when I'm ready to rejoin.
Okay.
All right, looks like Brian is gone. And I also should note that, and Vanessa, you may have seen it, it looked like someone from historical may have
Correct, yes.
emailed saying that they're available.
In the
Ms.
chat.
Christine's row is in the audience. If at any point you want us to move her over to speaking role, just let us know.
Okay. All right. Well, let's see. Ms. Braccio?
Thank you. So what I would like to ask the board to do on this is hold this until our next meeting and have Mr. Weisham come in. We've done this in the past on certain reappointments. I'd just like to have a conversation with him before we take a vote under consent for this.
I'm fine with that. Do you want to do it on the 21st or a regularly scheduled meeting? I don't want to plug up too much on the 21st because I think we're going to have a lot of ground to cover.
On a regularly scheduled meeting is fine. Again, I think it's good to have a conversation. That's all.
Okay. Can we just touch base and maybe have, is it the chair of historical And I just want to make sure that approaching it that way doesn't present any timing issues for them.
Okay.
Sure.
Katie, can you move her over, Rebecca, to a panelist? Thank you.
Ms. Deans Howe, can you hear me?
Hi, yes, thank you.
How are you doing?
I'm all right, thank you. How are you?
Good. So I'm hoping that you heard the proposal to put this on for, we're meeting, I think it's on August 18th, and have Michael Weishon come in for a chat before we vote on this. I just want to make sure that doesn't present any issues for you folks.
I don't think it will. I think that will allow us to have a meeting and vote on our, agreement that we would be very happy to have him back on the board, so we can present that at that time as well, send a letter to the Board of Selectmen. Yeah, that would be fine. Thank you.
Okay, terrific. Thanks for jumping in real quick, and we look forward to the letter, and we'll put it on our agenda for August.
Great, thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Thanks, Rebecca.
All right, Rebecca, bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, Lisa, do you want to make the motion then to continue?
Yes, I make a motion that we continue item D, appointment Michael Weisham to Historical Commission, term 6/30/23 until August 18th
Yes.
meeting. Okay, thank you.
Second.
Discussion. Seeing none, Ms. Braccio.
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski. Mr. Stivers.
Aye.
And Mr. Healy is aye, and I'm assuming the record reflects that Mr. Shea was not present, and that he abstained from any discussion or vote on this matter.
He probably went out
Right.
for a drink thinking this is going to be a long time. Might not be able to get him back. He just ordered
I know.
dinner.
I'm going to abstain. I'm going to abstain on something next.
Hola.
Hola, I know.
Hola, having dinner.
Just as a Mark, are you going to do the next item, the COVID-19 update?
I think you've gotten all the COVID you're going to get tonight.
Okay, that's fine.
In terms of recreation and everything. So I think there's nothing else to do on that piece. And I know that Melissa Danza is in the audience tonight, and she is probably much better suited than I am to handle the first two items that you have under other matters. If you have any questions.
All right. Well, we've got Mr. Shea back. Why don't we assume that there's likely to be some questions about these, and
Excuse me, Marty, before we move on from the COVID, can I just make one comment under the update on impact of COVID-19?
Sure.
So I just wanted the board to know, we only had one application for outside dining, and I wanted to say how successful it has been. Every time I drive by Ola, it's packed. I mean, the outside tables are
great.
full. So again, I think it was a great thing that we were able to do, and they have certainly benefited from it. So
All
that
right.
was it.
It looks great. It looks great too.
It does. It
It,
does.
it looks great.
Right. Thank you.
So can we move Ms. Danza in? I suspect there's going to be questions or comments, at least a couple. Melissa, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. All right. We are going to then move to, we've dealt with item 5. We're going to move to item 6A, which is proposed approval of Southborough Golf Club Conservation Restriction Management Plan. I think the item is self-explanatory. Does someone, do we want Ms. Danza to give a thumbnail sketch of where things stand with the management plan, and tell us that presumably conservation and others support it? Why don't we do that, Melissa?
Okay, sure. So as you guys are probably aware, the golf course restriction was recorded last year, and as a yearly condition, both the grantor and the grantees need to approve the yearly management plan. So this is something that you guys will see most likely much earlier in the year. And then, so this was something that myself and Kristen O'Brien from SVT put together, and both Conservation and the Golf Course Management Company have looked over it and agreed to the terms. Most of it, except for one item, is basically status quo, what the Golf Course Management Company does now. So we did not want to kind of extend and go above their means. I think the one real change is that they've agreed to establishing a 10-foot no mowing from the stream. I think it's along that first section there near Corderville Road. And that's in line with reaching the Audubon International status. So we'd like to get it up to 20 feet, but that's something that we've agreed that is incremental, and the 10-foot will definitely be a betterment to the habitat and the quality of the stream there as well. So other than that, most of the information is just kind of historic background information about the site, and then mainly what the Golf Course Management Company already does.
Yeah, except for the legal parts, it was actually interesting reading. So any questions for Ms. Danza?
Comment?
Ms. Braccio, like I said, you'd be very good in Jeopardy.
I know, I'm telling you, I hit that buzzer really quick. I just wanted to say, Melissa, I think this was really well done, and I appreciated the background on it and everything. So again, thank you for your hard work on this. And this was something that was overwhelmingly supported by the taxpayers. So again, thank you. That's it.
Thank you.
All right, is there a motion?
I'll move we approve.
Second.
Discussion. Ms. Braccio?
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski?
Aye.
Mr. Shea?
Aye.
Mr. Stivers?
Aye.
And Mr. Healy is aye. Next up, I didn't even know where Furman Avenue was, Melissa, and I've lived here quite a while. It looks like it's about 8 feet long, but why don't you give us again a thumbnail on what we're looking at for the Furman Avenue approval?
Sure. So this was actually a condition of the planning board site plan approval for 0 Furman Ave, to have this small parcel that's actually not attached to the 0 Furman development that's going to be for a U-Haul property. So most of it is in the adjacent town, with most of just the parking lot is in Southborough. And the current project is much less intensive than previously approved projects. So in that light, this is a benefit. And this property, it's about, I think, 2.5 acres or so, and it's completely surrounded by DCR property, and wetlands are predominantly, on the site. So there's not really much in terms of liability or maintenance, or even, housekeeping that we'll have to do with this site. So the CR itself is fairly basic. It's just the template from the state. We decided to waive the baseline survey because of the certain characteristics of the site. There's not surrounding structures or properties that we need to worry about, and it's such a small property that most of it's even visible from the road. So if DCR went to clear that, I think we'd have bigger problems than anything else. But other than that, Commission has already signed off of it. This is approved for local signatures by all parties, including the state. So once we have kind of your approval, it's just actually obtaining physical signatures and sending it back and just kind of getting it recorded.
Okay. Questions for Ms. Danza on this?
And Marty, there's a road, beginning of a road.
Excuse me, Sam. Excuse me.
Route 30.
Sam, excuse me. Ms. Malinowski had her hand up very quickly.
Okay.
Chelsea?
Thank you. Thanks, Melissa. Just 2 quick questions. Was this run by Aldo, and has Open Space reviewed this?
Aldo has definitely reviewed it. He gave his okay. And I believe it was Open Space was part of the planning decision.
Okay. Thank you.
Sam?
All set.
I have one comment, Marty.
Yes, Lisa.
Of course, and I didn't hit the buzzer. Just to make sure that we adjust the name on the sign-off page for the board, it still lists Dan instead of Chelsea.
Yes, I've already made that aware to them.
Okay,
So I
that
think
was it.
once you finally sign it, it'll have the right names.
All right, that's it. Thank you.
All right, so with the correction to the composition of our board, edited in the document, is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Any discussion? Ms. Braccio?
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski,
Aye.
Mr. Shea,
Aye.
Mr. Stivers,
Aye.
and Mr. Healy is aye. Thanks, Melissa.
Thank you so much. Have a good night.
Thank
You
you.
too. All right, next, Ms. Malinowski, item C, review of revised charge for golf committee. I thought it was a nice job. I only have one question on the duties before I jump in to see if other folks do. And my only question is the next to the last item. And I know shall is, shall doesn't really mean shall, but my only thought was to leave it up to the committee whether or not it made sense to develop a master plan. It may or may not. I don't know. But an awful lot of what might be in a master plan seemed to have been covered by the other bullet items that you listed. That's my only thought.
So I could have gone either way on that one. That was an after thought. That was kind of the last one I had put in based on some feedback. So I think I could go either way. I don't know, Mark, if you have anything to add on that. I think that was the one you and I went back and forth on.
Yeah, I'll take the bullet for that one, Chelsea. So that was kind of my suggestion in terms of, trying to put together a plan for, the golf course, ways to improve play, ways to make improvements of the course that may draw more people, that type of thing. Looking back at it now, I agree, Marty, you could probably go either way with it. It is kind of inclusive of a lot of the bullets that were in front of it. So that's.
Well, let's get other thoughts on that's my only again, Chelsea, I thought it's extremely well done and would serve a golf course committee well.
Thank you. I have one other thing that I thought of after the fact was as I was actually watching the rec meeting last week, I was thinking it would be nice if we could kind of incorporate Tim Davis's role into this charge because I think there's some synergies that we could find and maybe to improve some programs that we offer in town. So Mark and I talked about maybe making Tim an ex officio member of this committee and kind of have them bounce ideas off of him and have him be a part of the process.
That sounds like a very good idea. Okay.
The only other.
Okay. We'll start with Mr. Shea. Any observations, comments?
No, I like that last point actually very much, to include Tim in that. I didn't have any comments on the policy itself. I thought it was great and look forward to getting the word out to people in town that we have this open committee that's starting.
Mr. Stivers, anything?
Yeah, a few comments if I can. I'll get to it in a minute, but I like the master plan concept, I guess. But in the first part, in terms of the first bullet point, in terms of professional backgrounds and qualifications, it seems to me that it might be worth broadening that a little bit to adding or interests there. I think it'd be great to have people with professional skills in this on the committee, but it seems to me that if you make it too narrow, it might be difficult to get people who are who meet the backgrounds and qualifications requirement there. So I'd think about adding interest to that. On the term and organization in the second bullet point, report to the Board of Selectmen, we might consider saying with an annual report provided no later than 60 days after the end of the golf season. I think it's helpful to be specific in terms of expectations for that. And in the duties, about second bullet point, provide a scorecard to evaluate, I'd add at least annually in there to, again, set expectations in terms of timing. The third bullet point from the end, I'd say the committee shall solicit and accept. Seems to me it's better to have it more active than passive. And next bullet point, develop a master plan. I'd say develop both longer term that include longer term goals and annual goals for the golf course, because I think it's helpful to think about these things more than on an annual basis. There are some, again, longer term possibilities. As I participated in some of the golf committee meetings previously, there are folks out there who are actually running these courses in a very aggressive way relative to what we've been doing historically. And I think it's helpful to set some of those longer term goals as we go through this process. So those are my thoughts about adding a few points in there.
Yeah. It seemed to me the longer term goals could be covered through the capital improvement identification. I would think that, similar to other departments in town, that I could see where a capital improvement program would be set up that would, include longer term goals. And I think that's where those could be addressed. And I think are already in the verbiage that we have.
Yeah, I don't object to that. I'd like to see somebody thinking longer term there, and for the golf course committee here to have an active role in that process, which they certainly could do.
Again, I'm agnostic. I'm not a golfer. I don't find any of those objectionable. Chelsea, what's your reaction to any of those suggestions?
So just to clarify on the term and organization on the second bullet point, you want to add 60 days from the end of the golf season. So you're talking about like by the end of February, you want to report. Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah, an annual report provided no later than 60 days after the end of the golf season, just to set some time parameters on it.
Yeah, I mean, I tried to, I think that's fine. I think with your long and short term goals, I did try to incorporate that, but I guess I didn't specifically call it out. I don't know that it needs to be called out, but I'm not opposed to it.
Yeah. I feel more strongly, unlike Marty, I guess, in terms of the master plan component, because I think we ought to be pushing these folks to think longer term and set some objectives.
I guess if you're going to say if you're going to keep the master plan bullet in there, then I wouldn't call out short versus long term goals, because then I think
I would be happy with master plan and not the long and short term.
Marty, if I may.
Yeah, Brian.
So I don't know that I would put in 60 days there. And again, just thinking of the time of year that it is, golf is probably going to go to mid-November or so. So that means 60 days is mid-January. I would really love to see something before that. And I think that if I were on this golf course committee, I wouldn't want to have this report that we have hanging over my head through the whole holiday season as well. I just get it wrapped up before Christmas, meet with us in December, and start thinking towards the next year after that. So I don't know that I mean, we could put 60, doesn't really matter, but I would love to see it sooner than 60, but don't want to pressure them into 30 as well. So kind of like the way it's written. I think, I think we as a board can communicate with this group and say, hey, we'd love to set up a meeting with you, a second week or second meeting in December, just to get a wrap on this year's golf season.
Okay. And if we do that, I'm fine with that. I just think it's, important to follow up fairly quickly.
Okay. Well, Lisa, did you have anything?
Just one thing, that I didn't see anything in here about the Audubon International certifications. I know that's in process. That hasn't happened. I'd like to see it fall under the golf course committee to be involved in that. I know CPC funded that, but maybe working with CPC to ensure that we get the certification and it's continued year to year.
Would that be part of the master plan discussion, Lisa, with regard to setting annual goals and?
Could be.
Okay.
I just want to make sure that that piece doesn't fall out. That's all.
Maybe just put and obviously we're not going to be able to vote on this tonight because we've got to see the additional language. So my first question would be, Chelsea, do you think you could turn this around so that it could be a pretty straightforward item for July 21?
Yes.
Okay, I'll accept that as yes. And maybe following up on Lisa's point, I'll leave it to you from a Scrivener's standpoint, but maybe just put in the master plan, including but not limited to the Audubon.
Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right, so we will not, we'll just put that over. I don't think we need a vote on it. We'll just put that over to July 21 for hopefully final consideration. Everybody comfortable with that? Okay. All right. I'm trying to decide whether or not to do D or E first. You know what? Let me give a shot at E, and hopefully maybe we can have a short discussion about July 21, which will be obviously July 21 will be a long discussion. But Ms. Hale and I and Mr. Purple tried to get coverage for an in-person meeting, and were unfortunately unsuccessful, unless we don't want to have it videotaped. Correct, Vanessa?
That's correct. Sam is
Yeah.
not doing in-person meetings yet at this point, so we don't have an ability to film on our own.
So since it would be difficult to have a meeting where basically it would be open to the public if we were all in person, and that meeting couldn't be televised, I mean, I guess we could go ahead anyway and just have there's an awful lot of flexibility in the governor's March 12 and March 15 statements about open meetings laws. So I guess I'll take people's temperature in terms of location, whether or not to do it the way we've been doing these on Zoom, or whether or not to have an in-person meeting, which I think everybody would prefer, but it would have to be an in-person meeting with very limited, if any, outside attendance. There'd be no video of it, and the record of it would be the minutes of the meetings primarily.
I did want to just point out, Mr. Chairman, that a number of years ago when we started doing these board retreats, some of them were held off campus over at Fay or St. Mark's. They've been very generous about loaning us meeting space. So in those instances, those meetings were not televised either.
Okay.
But the public was
Yeah.
allowed to attend. So that is kind of
Yeah.
the difference this year.
Yeah.
In fact, I don't think our meeting last year was televised as well. Didn't we meet at the DPW office?
Fire station, wasn't
On
it?
No,
Remember, maybe.
fire station I don't think was complete yet.
It could have
In
been
August.
DPW.
I thought it was the
Yeah.
DPW.
It was
meeting
DPW.
room.
Yeah.
It was. Yep.
Yeah, this is why you don't trust eyewitness testimony.
Yeah.
Sam's got us at the fire station, and everybody else has got us at
Nobody
the
else showed up.
DPW.
It was a great meeting.
I guarantee it didn't happen in a building that wasn't open yet. So that's, so in
I'm-
any case, so we've had them in the past, not televised as well. So
Yeah, it's not going to be substantive town business. It's going to be a discussion about our goals. So in that respect, I'm willing to sacrifice the, again, it would have to be, I'm not sure if we would be able to allow anybody to be in attendance. I mean, it creates all sorts of COVID issues that I'm not sure we'd be ready to address. But I think the governor's executive orders give us enough flexibility to provide compliance with open meetings through detailed minutes of the meeting, and that would allow us the ability to meet in person. Again, it wouldn't be videotaped. There wouldn't be public attendance, but there would be a detailed public record of the meeting through our minutes of the meeting. So what are folks' thoughts?
Marty,
Yes, Sam.
a question for Vanessa. Does Sam have any prediction in terms of when they will be able to video meetings like this?
Not at this time, Mr. Stivers. I did speak with one of their employees at length about this, and they are not endorsing filming in-person meetings right now. I did ask when the board would be meeting again in case the selectmen wanted to have a conversation about this, and they, I want to say it was early August that they're meeting again.
My thought was if they're going to be doing it in another couple of weeks or something, then maybe you think about it. Yeah, Marty, I'm a little concerned about doing it without video record. On the other hand, I think it's important to keep the process moving. one way or another, I think we ought to have the discussion next week, whether it's in person or remotely like this.
Oh, I'm not suggesting we not do it on July 21. It's just a question of whether or not we do it this way on Zoom, or whether we meet in person without the ability for public attendance at the meeting and without the ability to film the meeting.
Yeah.
So, have you considered what venues it would be if it were to be an in-person meeting?
Well,
And
it
I guess-
couldn't be your normal meeting room because that's being painted.
Okay. And I'm wondering, would it be possible for it to be recorded in a separate way? Like, could someone bring an iPad set up on a stand somewhere that just records it, and that could be posted afterwards? I'm just wondering if there are other options that could be considered for, and again, not knowing exactly what venue you're considering if it were to be an in-person meeting. So.
Yeah, we talked about the Trotter Library, although I think the SAM people said they didn't think that would be usable for socially distanced meeting. I don't think that's right, but I seem to remember that library being pretty roomy.
Marty, if I may.
Yeah, Lisa.
So I like the idea, Brian, of being able to tape it. My concern, whether it was taped in the past or not, in this new age of Zoom that we've all learned, I have had so many positive comments from people that are watching boards and committees meetings they may not have gone to in the past. I think we've created a new audience, and I worry that we aren't doing our Board of Selectmen meetings in person, that we would do a goal setting meeting where it's an opportunity for the citizens to see what their Board of Selectmen are thinking, what our thought process is, or what are the things we'd like to have done for the forthcoming year. I just worry about not doing that and having the opportunity for somebody. I know, Sam, you attended them, whether, before you were on the board, but
Whether I was invited or not.
But I just think that we've got a new audience of people that are taking advantage of the Zoom and the remote participation meetings. And I worry that something as important as this, I think it might be good for them to hear what each of us are thinking and some of the things that are important to each of us at the discussion. So I like meeting in person if we can find a way to tape it. And Brian, I think that's brilliant. If we can find a way to do this, I would be 100% in support of it.
All right. Well, why don't we leave the location issue at this then? I'll work with Ms. Hale and Mr. Purple in just the next day or two and see if there's a way to A, firm up a location, and B, that we'd be comfortable with a way to video. If not, then we'll just do it through Zoom, and hopefully see each other in person again at some point. Yeah. And then, so that's my suggestion for the location issue. Is everybody comfortable with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
In terms of I looked at Vanessa was able to dig out, the minutes from last year, the spreadsheets from last year, some stuff some consultants had done on planning meetings from previous years, and I think the substance is more important than the what it looks like. And so I want to, my proposal is to keep it simple and to get from everybody, before the end of this week, before the packet, just a list of 8 or 10 things that they think are important to talk about. Send them to Mark, send them to me. We'll put them in buckets, whether it's process, whether it's public communication, whether it's the way we do the meetings, whether it's relates to planning, conservation, open space, and put them in buckets and have that discussion rather than trying to go through a spreadsheet about who would be responsible for it. We can figure that out afterwards, is my view, but just get the subjects down on paper that we want to talk about. So that's my suggestion for how we deal with July 21. And the one other thing I'll say is I don't think that July 21 is the only time we're going to do this. One of the advantages of a COVID summer is we're accessible through this medium, if nothing else. And I suspect that you know, I see an awful lot of energy from Ms. Malinowski as our newest member. And I know the four of us have an awful lot of energy for subjects. And I suspect that we're not just going to talk about planning on July 21st. So that's my suggestion, to not overcomplicate it and just get a list of things we want to talk about. I'll organize them, put them in some sort of buckets, and we'll get going on July 21 and see how much energy and stamina we have.
I think that's a great idea, Marty, and I think you're going to find a lot of us are probably going to have overlapping items.
Yep.
So.
And another suggestion, Marty, is that I think it would be helpful to have some sort of framework for what the expectation is coming out of next week's meeting. So you might think about posing something, you know, what are we trying to get to by the end of next week's meeting as a starting point for discussion to provide some traction, hopefully.
No, that's very, and that's definitely part of it, Sam. But and honestly, that's my if not 1A item is exactly that. What is it we're trying to plan? Just having a list of goals, I don't think is sufficient. I think it needs to be more layered than that. So I think that's going to be part and parcel about what we talk about on July 21. And as I said, I don't think it's going to be a single meeting. I hope it's not. And I suspect that there's an awful lot of things that people want to talk about.
Yep, good.
Mr. Shea, I think I see you're nodding. Are you in agreement with this?
I do agree, yes.
Okay, all right. And Chelsea and Lisa are both smiling, so I'm going to assume those are yeses as well. All right, so the discussion was as quick as I thought. We'll follow up. Get us lists of 8 or 10. Sam, can you keep it to 8 or 10?
With great effort. Does that mean a page for each of 8 or 10? Or?
Yeah, are you going to have subparts?
Yeah,
and
I have on rare occasions actually been brief, Marty, so I'll try it.
All right. And Vanessa, Mark, and I will follow up and see. I'm not, when I saw the stuff from Sam, I was not Sam Stivers, but Southborough Access. I was not terribly hopeful that we were going to be able to videotape. Brian's idea is a good one. We'll see if it works. If not, we'll see each other this way next July 21. All right, that leaves us with, I took a walk over to the townhouse yesterday and I looked up in the air. So this could be very short, but let's Mark, exactly what is in front of us? Is there a proposal from Crown Castle that we need to act on? Or are we just going to be discussing tonight what our reaction is to what they've done and what they are proposing? Is there something we need to do either to approve or to reject where they are?
So I think how formal the action is, I think, is up to the board, and we can discuss whether a formal vote would make sense. There is not a specific proposal that needs an up or down tonight. However, you just mentioned, you took a walk to the townhouse, you looked up at the flagpole, and and it looks hideous. We can't fly a flag off of it at this point. And quite honestly, if we had allowed them to finish the work that they were doing, it might have allowed them the capability to put in antennas that probably they shouldn't be allowed to put in yet unless they went through the process that the town has laid out. Again, I think they tried to sneak that one past us, and I appreciate Facilities and Building catching that before it got too far. What you've got in front of you tonight, there's a lot of paperwork, but there's essentially 3 items. Crown Castle, who is the lessee for for the AT&T antennas in the flagpole, is suggesting a modification to the flagpole that would allow this tapper up at the top. So it would have a wider top than a normal flagpole. So the flagpole tapering as it goes up, it would taper, and then when you get near the top, it would become wider to accommodate those those new antennas, and then they could hang a flag over that, and assumably the flag would provide some camouflage for that improvement. That's one thing before the board tonight.
No.
What's
No.
that?
I'll
Shay,
second
no.
that.
That is,
Brascio, no.
that
Yeah.
is just not going to happen.
That's a quick
So,
one.
so the other, so, all right, so this is going to go kind of maybe as fast as you thought it might, Mr. Chairman. The second piece is we receive annual income from for that poll. It's about $3,000 a month, so it's about $36,000 a year. I've been told by Mr. Barbadora at Crown Castle that a flagpole, the cell tower as a flagpole does not operate, for AT&T anymore in terms of the new equipment, new technology. So if it's just going to be a flagpole, it likely isn't going to work for AT&T anymore as a cell tower. So the second question that I have in my mind that I think I need the input back from the board on is, does the board value the $36,000 in revenue that we receive each year more than you do having a flagpole? In other words, is the flagpole more valuable than the revenue income?
All right, that's
The primary purpose is a flagpole,
Flagpole.
period.
And to disrespect our veterans and not respect the flag for $36,000 just is ridiculous to me.
I agree. And I do want to point out, Lisa, since you said that, is that, I do appreciate, because that happened and, on July 4th, we could not fly the flag on the flagpole. What John Parent and facilities at least tried to do with the flags on the outside of the townhouse, to try to have something. I agree it wasn't what it should have been, but it was nice to do something. So the third point of this is that the lease is coming to an end in October. And if I understood answer one and answer two correctly, then I pretty much know where answer three is going. Is the board interested in continuing the lease or executing a new lease agreement with Crown Castle for a cell tower at that location that we've been essentially told will not work if it continues to look like a flagpole?
If it looks like a flagpole, I'd be willing to listen.
Yeah.
But, and also Marty, if I can add, Steve Wynot is out he's a participant in the outside room. I would really be interested to hear his thoughts, and Brian Stearns is out there as well. I mean, I think
All right.
we've made ourselves pretty clear, but
While let me just mention, while they're being brought into the meeting, I do want to remind you that as part, and it's in the documents that you were given, as part of the lease agreement, when we decide to terminate the relationship, all the cell equipment is removed, all of the equipment that they have in the townhouse is removed and in the basement, and the flagpole is left as a flagpole. So, you still are left with a flagpole at the end of the day, which again is the important piece here. So
All right,
I'll leave it at that.
Before we go to Mr. Wynot and Mr. Stearns, I just want to add a fourth, which is the non-price requirements as they relate to construction of the flagpole are pretty damn clear. They're clear about two things. Number one, plans and design calculations shall be submitted to the town for its review and approval, number one. And number two, the design specifics couldn't be more clear that the flagpole will continue to look like a flagpole. Now, they clearly acted inconsistent with both of those provisions. And what are they going to do to make the town whole for the fact that we haven't had our flagpole in the way the contract is supposed to have it for some length of time and continuing? So that's my number four. What's their answer to that?
I like your number 4. Yeah.
All right. Does anybody else have anything to add before we have Mr. Why don't we go to Mr. Wynot first and then Mr. Stearns? Steve, are you out there? Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you folks hear me?
We can.
Okay, very good.
The
This is my
floor is
first time.
yours.
This is one of my first time, but one of the first times doing a Zoom meeting here. So pardon me if I, don't connect with the technology. But yes, I am totally appreciative of Mr. Parent and the building commissioner of stopping the action where it was, because as mentioned, if they were able to finish, you'd never get them back. And the domination that's on the top of the pole is absolutely, totally unacceptable. I remember sitting in the town hall there in 2009, I think it was, or 2011. I think it was 2011.
Yep.
And they proposed we called it a stick. It was just this big pole sticking up in the air. It was horrendous looking. They were supposed to come back with another plan. And then they show up with this thing on top, 9 years later. So I appreciate everyone here on the board. From what I'm seeing, total opposition against this. They were asked to go find another place in town to put this new tower if that's what they needed. And I think they need to go back to the drawing board and take their design and figure something else. But to have that in front of the town hall, I don't know if you've talked to Bonnie Faniff. I've never seen Bonnie so upset when she looked at that. It just ruins the whole character of the front of the town hall. And thankfully, Mr. Parent was able to get some flags up there at least for the 4th of July, and at least have something on the front of the town. So I appreciate you folks saying, no, this ain't gonna happen, and not selling us the town out for whatever they 36,000 or whatever the dollar value is. Let them go back and come up with something different. So
All
I
right.
appreciate it. Thank you for your time.
Mr.
you,
Weiner,
Steve.
thanks for your comments. And I'm not sure if, again, from the technology standpoint, I don't know if you can see us nodding along in agreement with pretty much
I can
everything
see
you've
you.
said.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. All right, good.
Thank you.
All right, great. Mr. Stearns, are you there? And do you want to weigh in? You have to unmute yourself. Maybe he's gone.
No, he's
Nope.
still there.
All right.
All right, how's that?
Mr. Stearns, welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the board and everybody for their efforts on keeping a flagpole a flagpole. I guess my comments are aesthetically, it's unpleasing to look up and see a flag and see something attached to the pole beside it. Regardless, the flag is not meant there to cover anything. The flag is meant to fly. The second thing I had was I met with the Worcester County Veterans Officers Association today, and this sets a really bad precedent. If it were to happen in Southborough, a town that is so pleasing to drive through, to sit through, a town like Southborough, then it could happen in any town. And that's a big concern for the veterans of Worcester County, at least, the veterans officers. Their towns are not looking for anything to undo what is historic. Our flag is historic, our flag is ours, and it's something that our children look up and they don't need to ask the question, what's that on top of the flagpole? It should be a flag. So that's my comments. I appreciate your time, and I appreciate the board's view as I see it. And I have to agree, there's no dollar amount that can be placed on visual effects of flying the flag. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Stearns, well said. And, I hadn't thought about it from a precedent standpoint, but yeah, that's a good point. So thanks for sharing that. Mark, I think you have a pretty clear understanding of what again, there's no specific item in front of us, but I think our sentiments are pretty clear about what needs to be done with respect to that flagpole.
Crystal.
Marty,
Okay.
question?
Was that you, Sam?
Marty, question, if I may?
Yeah.
Mark, somebody raised the point of other locations. Is there other town property in the general area that might serve as an alternate? It wouldn't be a bad idea to hang on to the revenue if we can in a reasonable way somewhere else.
I mean, I'm not aware. I'm not aware of anything. Obviously, there would need to be a process that they would need to go through, to try and determine, does the height work for them? They would need to do all sorts of tests you know, in terms of radio waves.
Okay.
It's a real process. And then I think, you know, because we're doing a different location, this was originally, the lease was originally approved, lease of town land was approved by town meeting. So we need to go back to town meeting. It's not a short and quick thing. I think it's something that, you know, we could take our time with, depending on whether we're having a meeting in the fall or a meeting in the spring, but they would need to do some homework.
Okay, well, just if that's a possibility, then that's something that might be worth exploring. Clearly, doesn't work where it is, so we need to move on. with
Yeah,
that.
and Sam, my reaction is that they have been incredibly, aside from taking the steps with respect to the poll, they've been incredibly disingenuous about this, trying to put it back that, well, this will harm users because it'll make it more difficult for 911 calls, etc. No, what this will do is it will harm their service and they will lose customers. So if this is important enough for them that they need a cell tower there to serve their customers, they'll figure out a way to do it.
Yeah, and do we think
Mr.
they're
Healy?
actually working on restoring the pole to its original condition as of a few months ago?
They
Yes.
have to.
Yes, they have to. They have to. And if the board, you know, so my indication to Crown Castle will be that the board wants it to remain as a flagpole. If you can continue to use it effectively for AT&T or anyone else as a flagpole and keep the equipment contained within the flagpole as it is, then, you know, then I think the board would be interested. But if there's going to be anything that, as you suggested, the board is not interested in extending or in renewing the lease.
And
Mr.
Brian,
Healy,
I'm
may
sure
I?
you're going to say that I stubbed my toe from an engineering perspective in something I said.
No, no, not at all. No, I think the ball's in their court to look for another location. You know, it's not incumbent upon us to find a place. It's their responsibility to do it, in my opinion.
I agree, Brian.
Oh, Mr. Healy, if I may?
Yeah.
Do you want it again? You know, when
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know where that was coming from, Steve.
I'm sorry. When we met with them 2011, that was what I understood they were supposed to do, is to go find another alternate location. So they've had 9 years here to look for that location and do all their tests and do whatever they needed to do. And I don't know, what I see as a layman is that they didn't do much except come up with this god awful design and try to sneak it through. And I'm glad that we had people in town, you know, looking at this and saying, no, this ain't gonna happen. So they've had time to do something.
All right. Again, well said, Mr. Wynot. All right. So again, Mark, just coming full circle, I think you've got your marching orders in terms of
I do.
communicating with these folks.
I do. I'll take care of that and I'll make sure the board is copied.
All right.
And can
Final.
I'm
sorry.
Can you is there a time frame for them to restore, as it is now, to restore the pole back to the flagpole that we've seen? Is there a time frame on them where can they continue to drag this out for months on end?
Well, and that's the question, Steve. So once they're informed that if they, you know, if they can't make that pole work for them, if it doesn't, you know, if it has to look like a flagpole, then they know per the lease agreement, they've got to put it back before the lease ends, because they know the town's not going to extend it. So could they drag it out for, you know, for a couple of months now into, you know, into October, into September? Possibly, but you know, we're doing everything we can to make sure we've already got things in motion. They should be pretty close to having what they need to put it back. So I know that Lori Lavoli and John Parent and myself have been on them about that. So we're not gonna you know, let up on that piece.
Okay.
Yeah, and we'll see what their response is. They're going to get a pretty stern letter from our town council and maybe even outside council, because you can't do this.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to have violated a contract more clearly than they have.
Yeah.
So,
Very good. Thank you.
all right. Item 7, public comment.
Marty, before we go to that, I just have another item before. The
Okay.
board. So I've had the opportunity to watch several committee meetings over the last couple of weeks. And I would like to discuss at a future meeting how we can enable our boards and committees to properly conduct meetings within our code of conduct and be respectful with other boards and committees and town departments. So I'd like to just add that at a future meeting.
Oh, I think that should be on, that was one of my items. And word it the same way for July 21. It's a
Okay.
concern of mine as well.
Okay, thank you.
All right, is there anyone out there in cyberspace for public comment? I can't see. Vanessa?
Nobody that has raised their hand at this point.
Going, gone. All right, is there a motion?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Sec,
Ms. Braccio,
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski,
Aye.
Mr. Shea,
aye.
Mr. Stivers,
Aye.
and Mr. Healy, aye. We'll get your lists and we'll see you next Tuesday, folks, either somehow in person or through this medium. Take care.
Awesome. Thank you, Marty.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Yeah,
night.
good night.